What's going on, guys? We are back and we are talking about NA Qualifier 2. We're going to recap the entire thing and just talk about why G2 is just so good. Because, honestly, there's no one even close to them right now in North America. Is that a problem? We'll find out. We're at the hat stage of my hair. See, all right, so here's my problem, right? Need to get a haircut. I usually just buzz it down. But if I buzz it down about exactly a month before a major, then my hair looks great for a major. So I'm waiting for that. So we have a little bit of time. We have like one more week before I can get a haircut. So we're at the hat stage at this point. So let's just get into it. Here we go. Let's talk about what happened in Swiss, what happened in the playoffs, and all of that. One note, me and Wavefunk are going to do a power ranking show later today on Twitch. Actually, probably like right after you watch this video. I think we're going live at 1 p.m. Eastern, and this goes live at 12 p.m. Eastern. That'll be up on YouTube tomorrow, so you can check that out and see what me and Wave think of where people rank. But for now, let's talk about what happened. First, let's go through the Swiss. Anything surprising? Oh, we're in the wrong one. My bad. Qualifier 2. So let's talk about it. So we'll start at the bottom, I guess, and work our way up. Most of these teams at the bottom are the teams you expect to be near the bottom. I think this is the reason why a lot of people have problems with the format in terms of double elim. Every team has to play in it. People take seeds and all that stuff. Look at Gbufu. They were the 3 seed coming into this tournament. They win 1 game. Generally speaking, a double elim is not going to present you with the best teams going into a Swiss. And for that reason, when those teams do get the upsets and do make it in, people are like, well, you have to give them a chance. And you do in the other formats. You just have to do it a little bit more consistently. Normally, when those teams do come in here, they wind up being at the bottom. It's very rare that they make it to the top 8. And that is why I think a lot of people prefer the other way. Because of, like, at least do a closed Swiss. Even top 8 teams get an invite. Those teams are way more likely to do some damage in a tournament than the other teams. The other teams can still make it and still grind their way up through the closed qualifiers, but you just have to be a little bit more consistent. Otherwise, you get, teams like... there's going to be teams that come in last anyway, so, there's always that, but it's just very unlikely that they make a top 8. So, start at the bottom. We got G-Buff. We got Akron, both 0-3. Akron at least had a close game against Space Station. We'll talk about Space Station here in a little bit. I want to really mention them. Leftovers as well. Oh, they only took out G-Buff. Deleted's a weird one because they did take out OG, but then they just got destroyed basically by everyone else. Dignitas is a big story. I kind of called it on the Friday show. I was like, at some point, they're going to have a bad result because the team on paper is not as good as what the results that they are putting out. And maybe I'm just completely wrong, but I felt like there had to be a downswing at some point. Here's your downswing. Not only do they go out 1-3, they literally have a very easy Swiss and they can't come out. Normally, if you lose round 1, you're generally going to have an easier Swiss compared to, like, say you win round 1, then you're going to have a little bit of a tougher time. But either way, it doesn't really matter. They lose to Omelette, who Omelette didn't even qualify for the first qualifier. They are a good team, probably around like the 12th or so power rank team. But you shouldn't be losing that match if you're Dignitas. They beat the Leftovers, who, again, they finished 1-3. They only beat G-Buff, who only won 1 game on the day. So not a great result, but, that's a game that you have to win, and you do it. They played Pirates on a Boat. They were the 3-2 team into Swiss. Sure, Pirates on a Boat is a good team, but they were 3-2, right? So that's a matchup that you could win. You have the potential to. Then they lose to OG. OG, again, another 3-2 team. At that time, they literally beat no one. They beat Akron, and that's it. They were 0-2 before that. So at that moment, Dignitas should probably win that. Maybe it's a little bit unlucky. They'll probably bounce back a little bit, but Dignitas, not a good result for them, and that's going to lead into a lot of issues going into who's going to make it to the top 4 at the major, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Then we got Incorrect, who actually had a decent Swiss. They went 0-3 versus Luminosity. They 3-0 Akron and TSM. TSM's a weird one. Energy, they get swept, and then OG, they get swept. They played only 15 games. It was a quick day for them, I guess. But they don't make it out. But that's another one of those teams that's a new team, a new face. It's a good result. Hopefully that they can build upon that. Omelet also went 2-3. I think that's an expected result for an Omelet squad. They beat Dig 3-2, lose to G2, obviously. XD 3-0, which is good. They lose to GenG, then they lose to Luminosity. They honestly just had a really tough road. So you can't really blame them too much here because they beat the teams that they're supposed to beat and even got the upset on Dig. And then they lost to the teams above them, really. So they lost to the top 2 teams in an A, and then they lose to Luminosity, who was starting to heat up. So can't really fault them. I could see Omelet making a top 8 at some point, but for this one, they did not. TSM, taking out G-Buff, losing to M80, losing to Incorrect 3-0, then taking out XD 3-0, and then losing to Pirates on a boat 3-0. TSM is one of those teams in the offseason. They look great. They need to start getting these results in the RLCS. They should not be a 2-3 team every single time, or last time they were 1-3, so I guess they did improve technically, but if you want to be one of the top 8 teams, Pirates on a Boat is a perfect example of a team that you should beat if you want to be up there, right? Pirates on a Boat is on the cusp, right? They're like the gatekeepers of top 8. So if you want to be a top 8, you got to beat them. At least make it close. It was a 3-0. So Pirates on a Boat, good team, but again, if you want to be up there, you got to beat what's in front of you. Moving on, Pirates on a Boat. They take down XD, they lose to GenG, they take down Dig, lose the space station, beat TSM. That's exactly what they should do. They lost to teams above them. They beat teams below them. They got the upset on Dig, but that's like pretty much everyone here. So Pirates on a Boat doing what they need to do to be a top 8 team. They just got to find that one little extra form, maybe some bracket luck, and they could possibly be into a top 4. OG is super weird. They lose to GenG 3-1. I'm going to actually go down to the match, too, because I think they got dominated, too. Yeah, they got dominated in games 1 and 2. They did fight back a little bit later. But, like, OG's weird. Like, the incredibly weird results, and there's a few of them throughout the Swiss, is the OG XD 3-0 here. 3-2, 2-1, 1-0. So, 3 1-goal games, but that's an odd result. I'm not sure if you even saw that. So, there you go. You can kind of see it. But they lose that. At that point, I think we all think they're done. I think Wavefunk even said, like, it's over. Like, OG is done. They take on Akron. They 3-0 them, which is a good sign, but it's a team they should beat. And they do it pretty handily. Yeah, 5-0, 3-2, 5-1. So they take them out. You guys can't see all of this because I was trying to make it neat. Here, I'll move it out a little bit for you guys. But that's a team that if they lost to, it's like, all right, just get rid of the entire roster at that point. So they win that. And then they move on to round 4, and you're like, okay, they're playing Dig. They should probably lose this. They do this one on stream as well, and they take them down. 2 close games, and then a 2-goal win there at the end. So OG, all right, are they back? Did they get a pretty nice matchup here where they take down Incorrect, and they destroy him in game 1, then 2 close games. So OG's kind of weird. I'm not super sold on OG because, like, when you go 0-2 and then you make it out 3-2, you're obviously going to play weaker opponents. And they also got the weakest team they could possibly get in that round 5. But they do take out M80. You could call it the Merchants of Swiss and all that stuff with Jorius, but still, it's a quality win. So that's like their first quality win, I would say, on the year. Like, I guess Dig as well, but Dig also just, like, they just fell apart, right? So they do that, but then they go up against Luminosity, and sure, some close games, but Luminosity was the better team, and I'm not really too surprised there. So OG, it's still a wait and see, I think, with OG, because they need to do better at the beginning of Swiss and get a better seed and all that stuff, or just play M80 each time. So they're right in the power rankings, or right in the top 4 race for the major, but they're kind of, I don't know, weird. Luminosity. You want to talk about the weirdest result in Swiss? I have to say the weirdest result was this Energy 3-0. I just don't get it. I don't understand how that happens. They 3-0 incorrect. They lose the space station in a close one, game 5. I actually thought they outplayed them, but they lost. Energy 3-0. Leftovers, they 3-0 and then 3-1 omelet. And they had a lot of crooked numbers on their scorecard. They were putting up tons of goals against teams that they're supposed to beat, which is fantastic. That is what you want to see, is like any team below you, if you can dominate them, then you're looking good. You should finish top 8 in Swiss most times if you do that. Still, a 3-2 is weird. The problem is Energy is a team below them, and they got 3-0'd. And that was an ugly match. Ugly match. I went back and watched it, and it was ugly. So Luminosity is a hard one. They obviously got an easy bracket, and they made it through. They take down Energy, which is what we expected the first time. Then they take down OG, and then they lose to G2. So, like, they're a good team, and I did say they were my dark horse for top 4. I predicted them top 4. But you can't be losing to Energy 3-0. You just can't. That just cannot happen. So, yeah, they're a weird one. Space Station. Oh, Space Station. All right, so Space Station I want to talk about here real quick, because everyone's going to talk about bracket luck, Swiss luck. They're probably 3rd power ranked team by most, or at least 4th. But they always run into G2 and GenG. So I want to look at this, all right? So let's look at this real quick. They win 3-2 against Akron. You should not be winning 3-2 against Akron. That should be a 3-0. 3-2 versus Luminosity. Again, I thought Luminosity actually outplayed them. So, sure, whatever. Like, if that result happens, that happens. But if you want to be top 3 team, you should then be doing better than that. At least a 3-1, right? It should be a 3-0 and a 3-1. If they 3-0'd and 3-1, well, guess what? They would have been a higher seed than M80. They would have been the 2 seed going into this round. And who else was up there? GenG. Oh, no. Yeah, 3-0 and 3-1. Oh, no, I'm sorry. So they would have been a 3 seed, actually, still, with a 3-0, 3-0. Or just 3-0, 3-0. But GenG and G2 are so good that they always 3-1 and 3-0. So they move on up, right? They would have played GenG in Swiss instead, I believe. Yes. So they would have been a 2-3 matchup there. But again, if you want to move up, if you want to be better than the top 2, you got a 3-0. So say they lose that one, right? They lose here 3-1 to G2. Again, try and make it as close as you can, because game differential really matters. But then they go 3-2 against Pirates on a boat. They only have +1 game differential. So that's why you get seated so low. And that's why it's hard for you to move out of this, because it's weird. Because with the GenG, they lose to M80, right? So, like, in Swiss at least, they are not the number 2 team. That's M80 by far. So they run into M8, or they run into a GenG again in bracket. But again, if this game differential gets a little bit better, like in this case, it probably wouldn't have helped too much, right? Because of the Energy weird Swiss that they had, where they got +6. So if you take off 2 games here, 1 game here, you're at +4. And then Pirates on a boat, you can take off at least 1 game, you're +5 at least. So there's a chance that they can squeak back up to that 3rd seed if they dominate teams below them. You can't be losing these games. And people say, well, like, the main goal is to win the game, right? The main goal is to win every 5 minutes, right? That is the main goal. Win every 5 minutes and you'll be fine. They don't do that. They lose a lot of games. It puts them into these bad bracket spots. Really quick, I want to look at qualifier number 1 and see exactly how their Swiss went and see if they could have moved out of those spots, right? Because why not? All right, here we go. So this one was not necessarily their fault in the 2-0 round. They go 3-0, 3-1. So they did their job here in qualifier 1. G2, 3-2, 3-2. So it makes sense. So Space Station was the number 1 overall seed going into that, and they got unlucky. So that's definitely an unlucky G2 matchup. But again, if G2 is doing 3-2 and 3-2, they're beatable. So you could probably take them out, but they do not do that. They lose there, go up against Shopify, Rebellion, and they only 3-2. And again, that's another issue, right? If you have close games, you're going to drop in seed. So they drop in seed. They get the unfortunate of GenG. They get the 5th seed yet again. Dig's a weird one. They go 0-3, but then they swept everyone. And that's the thing. Sweeps matter, man. Sweeps matter. You got to win every 5 minutes. I know it's about winning the best of match, but you got to win every 5 minutes, or at least try to. They could have pushed themselves out with like young whippersnappers if they would have 3-0'd here, and then like a 3-1 versus Shopify, or even made the match with G2 a little bit closer. They could have pushed themselves up to a 3 seed and got a much better matchup. But hey, so it is a little bit bracket luck or Swiss like unluckiness, and then bracket unluckiness as well. But got to beat what's in front of you at some point, right? We'll see what they do. I still like the team. It's very hard to power rank them. And we'll talk about this later when me and Wavefunk power rank. It's like, where do you put them? Because they're playing teams close, at least in Qualifier 2. So where exactly do they go, right? It's very hard. But they're still in a great spot. All they really need to do is get a top 4, and they're probably in. So they'll be fighting for that next qualifier next week, I guess, as long as they make it through. But I want them to win these games a little stronger. Even in Qualifier 1, on day 2 of the open qualifiers, they had spots where they looked like they were about to lose. So, just got to dominate teams. Just got to do it. Moving on, GenG is what GenG does, right? They beat everyone. They lose to M80. They move on. Energy, again, was weird. They lose to M80. They beat G-Buff, which they're supposed to. This is the weird one, the 3-0. Then they beat Incorrect, who they got kind of a lucky draw out of that because of what Incorrect got. They got Akron and TSM, and they 3-0'd them both, which the TSM result is very bad for TSM. So they got a good matchup, so they do get in as the 3 seed. That's exactly what they need to do. They then get dominated by Luminosity, and they kind of fall back down to earth, right? Then you got M80, Swiss Merchants playing very well. G2 as well, playing very well. So they move on. In the bracket stage, yeah, G2, they dominate Pirates on a Boat. People will say it was close. Sure. Like, technically it was close, but it was not close. Like, sure, 1-goal games, but G2 had full control of that series. Sure, Pirates on a Boat might have got a win here or there, but they weren't going to win that series. GenG versus Space Station. This one was pretty competitive, and this is a good sign for Space Station. I liked what I saw out of them at times in this match, but GenG was just a little bit too much. OG M80. M80's got to figure this out. OG literally beat no one besides Dig, I guess. Going into that, M80 should have won that match. They do not. And then Luminosity destroy Energy. Wasn't even close. And that's where it's like, how did the 3-0 happen yesterday? I don't understand. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Moving on, G2 dominates GenG. Again, sure, close games, but again, like, I think this G2 very similar to old Energy, where they play teams close, they just play good ball on defense, and they get the goals when they need to get the goals. When they see an opening, they will counterattack, and they will get the goal that they absolutely need. Luminosity make short work of OG. It was close, but they do it. 4-1s, though. And again, another boring day in North America. And then G2 takes out Luminosity. The game 2 was rough because Luminosity, they go up 3-1, then they give up a wide open net, they give up a kickoff goal, and then a double whiff. And that is the games that Luminosity has to win. This happened back in Qualifier 1 when they played. Games 2 and 3 were very winnable for Luminosity. They could have been up 3-0 in that series, but instead they faltered and they lost. You can't make those mistakes against G2. Like, G2 honestly wasn't perfect like in this match as well. They had some weird own goals and stuff, but at that point the series was mostly over. G2 is just a class above. The problem is for G2, it's because they are so far ahead. Are they getting good practice? Like, are they getting ready for the international competition? And this isn't just Europe, and I know everyone's going to talk about Europe. It's also Mina looks fantastic. Sam has a chance to look fantastic. We'll see what Sam can do, because, like, it's Furia, like, and Complexity. Very likely 2 teams coming out of Sam. Both those teams made the major in Spring Split, and Furia, they upgraded their roster. I think a lot of people say Complexity may be side-graded. But still, Complexity was the number 2 team in NA by the end of the year. They had some very bad losses when it mattered most, but consistently over the whole time, I would say Complexity was probably the number 2 team in North America because of the phase implosion. So if Complexity can play like that, and if Furia is better than that, then they're going to be in very good competition against NA, against the G2. Well, but let's keep in mind that G2, for a long time, Daniel and Beast Mode were not very clutch at all. Beast Mode would show up at lands, he would have his moments, and then he would just completely go invisible. It's happened on V1 a lot. It could be because of the V1 team. You know, I'm not saying it's necessarily Beast Mode, but I'm just saying that happened a decent amount. Daniel, not very clutch. You can look at the kickoff goals and all that stuff back on the Space Station days, but at lands, outside of Gamers 8, which Gamers 8 is weird. Like, Gamers 8 is good for the nerves and the clutch factor and trying to gain back some momentum going into a new event. But in terms of, like, threes, they were mediocre. They were middle of the road. Again, it was a different team. Like, Atomic is a beast. Like, Atomic, one of the best players in the open era, always plays incredibly well, always makes grand finals or top 4s. One of the best players in NA, probably surpassing First Killer now at this point in the open era. So they have a great team. You got to see them on land, obviously. And I guess the one downside is because the practice right now seems not great in North America, do they go out early and boot camp as early as they possibly can, right? As soon as the third qualifier is over, just fly out and go boot camp with European teams. And also because Europe will have one more week where they have to play. So if they fly out literally on that Monday, they can get some good practice in on Thursday at the very least, because all those teams are getting ready to play in their Swiss, in their playoff stage. And I bet a lot of teams will be like, yes, we would love to scrim you to get some reps in. And then obviously they have like 2 more weeks after that, right? I guess about. So like G2, I think they're good enough to compete on the world stage. I think they're probably a top 4 team, but it's tough. It's tough, right? Because Europe is so good. Then you got Falcons. Then you got Sam. I don't put Rule 1 in that category yet, but Rule 1 obviously kept Falcons close, but I still think Falcons are the better team. It's tough. It's tough. Like, I think G2 right now be like 60% they should make top 4, maybe. But it's hard to tell. And then obviously, like, after top 4, who knows, right? Because if they are that dominant. Right now, I still would, obviously have EU at the top. But then everyone else, it's like, it's hard because G2 or NA was so bad last year that how much ground has G2 made up, right? To Europe, to even MENA at some point. So we'll see how it all plays out. I do like what I see out of G2. The one thing I haven't seen out of G2, and this is not their fault, is they haven't been tested. And if they're not tested, I can't see like the true G2, right? So that is the difficult part. They're just dominating everyone. And who knows, maybe they just dominate the entire world. It's possible. It's doubtful because I don't think the NA teams are playing that well. So that's the only thing I need to see out of G2 is when a team actually tests them, how do they perform then? But I still like them a lot. They're playing great. But Luminosity, GenG, like that's the biggest disappointment is probably GenG because on paper that team should be number 1. I think the offseason was a mistake, obviously now based on what they've done because they decided to not play in anything to get ready for the RLCS year, and because of that, maybe they didn't get those reps in. Like I think people talk about the honeymoon phase and all that, but like. I don't think that's a real thing, like honestly. And it's also if you're teammates for so long, there's really no honeymoon phase when you've already been teammates for 5 months, even if you're not competing, because like the energy and the vibes have already changed from like we're excited because it's a new team to let's get to it and let's get to work and let's figure this out. So, GenG is a weird one, but now it looks like that offseason was probably a mistake. but there's still plenty of time, right? Qualifier 3, majors, that's where gen.g will shine, probably, with Appjack playing very well at the last few majors. I think Chronic has honestly underperformed a ton. I've seen a lot of weird mistakes out of him. And that's not to say the rest of the team has been playing great, but I think Chronic's got to pick it up just a little bit. Like if Chronic heats up, gen.g will probably be back into a spot where they can probably compete versus a G2. But we'll see. We'll see in qualifier number 3. I think I went a little bit long here. 25 minutes. My apologies. Really quick. Let's look at the points. I just kind of wanted to chat it out. So let me find these points here. All right, so NA, here's what we got right now. I don't have the exact playoff scenarios on hand right now, but I'll try and remember like off the top of my head. So G2 is clinched. gen.g, I think, only needs 2 wins in Swiss. Luminosity needs the top 8, I think. And then after that, it's kind of like a crapshoot, right? It just comes down to who beats who. Basically, all the way down to TSM. As long as TSM wins the tournament, there's a chance that they could have a tiebreaker, but they control their own destiny, right? Because if they win the tournament and win the tiebreaker, they are in. So all the way down to TSM, you control your own destiny, but it really comes down to Dig has the lead by 1 point. So when it comes down to brackets, making top 4 is probably going to be crucial for anyone who wants to surpass any of these teams. And if you do make top 4, you hope Dig is not up there. You hope the other teams that are tied with you are not up there, and then you will be in. You want a Luminosity up there to basically take points away from the other teams. So Luminosity looking very safe. We talked about that during qualifier 2. Like once that bracket was made, whoever did well like on that side of the bracket was going to be incredibly comfortable going into qualifier 3. So as long as they don't completely bomb out, and as long as G2 and gen.g continue playing well, they should be fine. But we'll see how it goes. I think right now, I would probably give it to Space Station. It would be Space Station or M80, depending on how that goes. But those would be my 2 teams that if I had to put money down to qualify, I would give it to M80 or Space Station. I think one of those very likely will make a top 4. I just don't know who. But or maybe both, and then they'll play a tiebreaker, which will be fantastic. So we'll see how it all plays out. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Qualifier 3 is gonna be great. We might do some VOD review next week. We don't really have time this week. We're gonna do a power ranking show tomorrow with Wavepunk, and then we'll probably talk a little bit more about EU on Thursday. So that'll do it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Sorry for the long video, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.